Welcome to Cycling Fashion Week, the only podcast in the world purely focused on cycling style, fashion, aesthetics, and culture. I'm your host, Alex, joined by my co-hosts, Warren and Tony. Cycling Fashion Week is brought to you by leclub.cc. Le Club is your go-to destination for the hottest, the coolest, the best cycling apparel and accessories. They have everything from Map to Albion to Sweet Protection to Quack shoes. They keep launching new stuff on their website. Brand new website, incredible web experience, leclub.cc. Use the code FashionWeek15 at leclub.cc. Get 15% off your order and you're in business. Warren and Tony, how is it going this week, fellas?
We're expanding to culture now. We're not just a fashion and aesthetics podcast. I like it. I think that we've come to be an authority on the fashion, but people definitely ask us cultures questions, and that's what we kind of bring in with some of our other segments. So I think it's a smart move by us.
Yeah, we're diversifying into culture. Look, I thought about that intro line a lot, and yeah, it's true. We're not just about cycling fashion. We are predominantly about cycling style. I'm not going to lie. But we also talk about cycling culture. We talk about things you do on a ride, things you don't do on a ride. They always have sort of aesthetics in mind, but it's part of broader cycling culture. So, guys, I want to talk about something before we go into our regular segments. We have a very special episode today. I know I say that all the time. This episode was a little bit different. We have a guest. He is a very special guest because he brought something to the table this week that is a little different than our typical guests bring. We have the very famous, the very popular YouTuber, Dustin Klein, mountain bike guy, gravel guy, resides in Portland, Oregon. He's also an artist. He's obviously very popular on YouTube and on Instagram. He puts videos of his rides. So very entertaining interview. Let's just say that was an interesting one for Warren to edit.
I know it seems like we're a tightly run ship here, which we are. So it was just a little different. Nothing wrong with that. I do want to say, because we forgot in the actual intro to the interview itself, he's also a clothing designer. He founded Cadence Collection, which is a kit brand out of California. He's no longer associated with them, but he did found Cadence, so we should also call that. He is currently a YouTuber, but as you'll hear in the interview, he does all sorts of things.
He's a character. I mean, he part of Warren's editing was editing out laughing fits for me. So you guys won't hear that, but that's a little behind the scenes there. It was quite entertaining for us.
Tony lost his composure a little bit during the interviews. At some point, Tony had to take a little break because he was laughing too much. But anyway, we got that later on the podcast today. Interview with Dustin Klein. A little bit different than what we normally do. We hope you enjoy it. Guys, I want to talk about something before we go into our regular segments. I am calling the top in the secondhand bike and accessories market right now. It's been crazy since the pandemic hit in 2020. We've been talking about it. There were supply chain difficulties. Demand had gone up. Supply had gone down. Prices basically skyrocketed for pieces of crap bikes that people were getting like insane prices for. And obviously you have the price gougers, people who try to take advantage of the situation. But I have started to notice on the Facebook groups, on the resale websites, I'm starting to notice a little loss of momentum here. I don't know if it's because stuff is reopening everywhere, that there's other things to do than just cycling, or if it's, people who got into cycling over the last couple of years that ended up not really enjoying it and are now offloading their bikes that they no longer want, or supply chains getting a little bit more fluid here and supply coming through. But I'm starting to see that people can't get away with the crazy prices that they have for crap products. And this week I saw someone selling a disgusting pair of shoes, like a truly disgusting pair of used shoes for basically retail price. And obviously they don't seem to have sold at that price. And I basically posted a link in the comment of the shoe at retail, and the guy took down the ad. And I think I did humanity a service by doing that. So credit to me for being the hero here. But anyway, That's it. I'm calling the top in the secondhand bike market.
I think I want to also credit kudos to the community because on some of these posts, people get inundated with comments basically saying, "Why are you charging this?" Similar to what you did, but it's a lot of people, and I think public shaming is a good idea, and it seems to work in this case. They defend it first, oh, the market will bear, and then they end up taking it down because they realize selling a 15-year-old bike for retail price is insane. I don't know if anyone's actually bought any of these for the insane prices, but
I think even if people are deleting those ads, they're probably still posting them on other sites where you can't comment. So your Craigslist or your Kijiji or whatever, your local buy and sell sites where people can't comment on the ads, because I think that probably a lot of the people are so delusional with their prices. Like in the Toronto Facebook Road buy and sell group this past week, someone posted a 2007 Trek Madone frame set for $2,500 and, was roundly shamed. They have since knocked down the price to $1,800.
Yeah, that's the difference, Warren, is I don't think they're moving right now. Like a couple of years ago, they were moving, and now I think it's remaining unsold. So
I agree. But what I was going to say, that's an instance where somebody knocked the price down. But I think when the ad gets deleted, I do wonder if they're just being sold elsewhere or trying to sell. But yeah, I think you're probably right. Like, I think the demand is not as high. Maybe if people are gotten into cycling, they've probably smartened up and they're telling their friends. Like,
I think inflation's biting into people's budgets. People have less disposable income to spend on stupid shit like cycling, like used cycling goods. I also think that now that everything is reopened, spending is shifting from goods to services. People are maybe going out to bars and restaurants and movie theaters a little bit much and spending maybe a little bit less time doing outdoor stuff. And a lot of the new cyclists that got in the last couple of years, like maybe they're not spending quite as much as they were before. Anyway, whole bunch of reasons. I think we're entering a bear market for secondhand bikes, and that's a good thing for humanity because more affordable bikes for us.
I also have something to chime in with on what I would say is a far more positive note. Negative note for me, but positive in the sort of grand scheme of things. I had a crash, I guess it was coming up on a couple weeks ago now, which unfortunately dented my beautiful Marinoni Puma DB. It's my dream bike. I love it. And I was obviously sort of upset by the dent, but I went and emailed the good people at Marinoni some photos. They got back to me with great customer service and very quick, can be fixed, and which sort of satiated me. They also let me know it's still safe to ride, until I feel like I have time to kind of let the bike go for 2 or 3 weeks. And so the reason I'm sort of telling this is I want to kind of give a shout out, not just to Marinoni, but to smaller brands that you can connect with the frame builder. Because I was thinking about it, how this was a really easy process. There's going to be some logistics involved in getting it to Montreal and getting it back and stripped and stuff. But my other bike is a Cannondale Cat X, which is an aluminum bike, so also a metal bike. And I was thinking about, with a big company like that, if I were to dent the top tube the way I did on my Marinoni, there's probably no way to fix it if it's a non-warranty thing, which I don't think a crash is. I would have that Cannondale, and I would just have to live with the dent in it because Cannondale's not going to take it back and cut out the top tube and redo it. They got proprietary tube shapes, so I don't think I could probably take it to a local frame builder. At least it wouldn't be the same type of bike. So I just think people out there kind of considering new bikes, especially maybe if it's in a bit of a higher budget, think about smaller frame, manufacturers, frame builders that you can, something happens to your bike, you can contact them directly. And I guarantee a lot of these are really good people, and they should be able to give you some sort of option to fix it.
Also, if your bike had been carbon, Tony, you probably wouldn't have a bike now. Probably be shadowed.
No, I mean, you could do carbon repair, which I guess can be a little more open if they're just sort of repairing crack. But I couldn't ride it until it was repaired, and carbon repair doesn't. I've seen some carbon repair, and there's some people do decent work, but just by the nature of having the way they have to relay everything, it never looks the same. Whereas my understanding is they're just going to cut out the top tube and put a new top tube in, repaint, and it'll just look exactly like the same bike.
Okay, news releases. We're going to talk about new stuff that came out in the world of cycling fashion. And this week, we are starting with, oh boy, a release From Adidas, the German shoe company. They are back in the cycling game, I think, from a few years ago. Obviously, when I think Adidas cycling, I think of the great Jan Ulrich wearing the telecom kit with the three lines, the three bands on the shoulders. That's the kind of great memories that I have of Adidas cycling. So I'm not against Adidas cycling. I think they have a heritage in cycling via guys like Jan Ulrich. But basically, they launched a new shoe. It is called the Parley Road Shoe, and it has a BOA. So it has BOA in the name. It's the Parley Road Shoe BOA. It is said to provide all-day comfort on the bike by reducing pressure points. And the shoe is made from ocean plastic waste that has been upcycled by Parley, an anti-pollution network. Obviously, it had a predecessor shoe just simply called the Road Shoe. It's a revamped version, but it's compatible with 3-bolt road cleats, and it uses a fiberglass reinforced midsole. Guys, what's your take on this?
Aesthetically, they are very ugly. We had, I think, more than one listener send this to us on Instagram being like, ew, or, whatever. The placement of the BOA is very strange. I feel like we're all probably going to have the same take. I don't really know what else more I can say. I will say they claim they've designed it for all-day comfort, and I think that has to do with the BOA placement. They're reducing pressure points, blah, blah, blah. As our listeners might remember, I've got pretty particular feet.
And you love to talk about them too.
I do.
Yeah, I hope our listeners send anything. Stop talking about Warren's feet, because I'd love to stop talking about it.
Tony would throw my feet into the canal if he could.
Oh, I can.
The reason I bring that up is, as much as even if these shoes were like the most comfortable shoes ever, I just couldn't do it. And to back that up, I recently bought a pair of Lake shoes, which I will be the first to admit are not the first brand I think of when it comes to shoe aesthetics. The pair I got are like fine. No offense to Lake. For me, your styling is not really doing it for me on anyone's except for the black colors. These are just so ugly to me that I just couldn't do it, even if they were the most comfortable things on my feet ever.
These are fucking hideous. These are awful shoes. They look like a soccer boot, which I know is, people say soccer shoe, but I'm pretty sure the real football people call it a football boot or a soccer boot. The hero photo that's on Bike Radar and the sort of pull tabs on the tongue to get it on, they're bulky. I don't mind the color. I could talk endlessly about the BOA placement, and I think I should say dial placement. I mean, I know it's BOA brand, but I'm going to start saying dial because BOA doesn't pay us, and so I'm just going to kind of more generalize it and not give them the Kleenex treatment, the rollerblade treatment. The BOA or the dial is such a great invention for a cycling shoe, and it looks so good typically. Quack or Physique or Specialized, they do such a good job of integrating it into design, and this looks so haphazard, so slapped on, like it looks like some sort of growth at the side of it. Even the Adidas 3 stripes are sort of short and fat, like they don't have that same sort of
panache.
They don't have the same panache. They don't have the same sort of styling as you would think on like a pair of Sambas or Gazelles or something. Like, I mean, they're Adidas, but it's not kind of as nice as regular Adidas. Like, I just hate this shoe. Like, I really do not like this shoe. Again, I think there's a lot of great shoes out there. So I think you got a lot more options than this, unless you're like a real like Adidas or Adidas fanboy. But I think this is just a terrible shoe. This is a 1 out of 10.
They're saying it's made with recycled plastic out of the ocean, but what I'd be curious to know is, what is the environmental impact of making shoes with plastic? Like, that sounds great, but are they using more resources, etc.? I'm too lazy to look it up and find out if it's more efficient or if it's the same. I don't know. Anyway, we're not here to do a deep dive into environmental
no, we're here
materials.
to talk about the style of those shoes, and I think we all agree that that's a miss.
Instead of throwing it into the canal, I'm going to toss it over the canal into the ocean, back where it came from.
Okay, all right. Second release we're going to talk about. Rapha released the Swiss collection. So it is a Swiss collection that has kind of a Swiss branding. So Switzerland, the beautiful alpine country with the cross, the red, the white. So they released a very kind of vintage looking jersey. It looks like a pretty thick jersey. They call it the Swiss jersey. It looks like it's merino. There's bib shorts. There's a Swiss wind jacket, so it's all black, but it's got the little red square Swiss flag with the white cross on it. There's a cap, there are socks, there's a musette, and the jersey basically says Kämpfer und Künstler, which I believe is the two Swiss icons that they are naming this collection after. So yeah, Rapha just going more into the vintage stuff, the merino, which historically I've actually loved Rapha merino. I think their merino wool is very high quality, and I've enjoyed riding it on gravel in chilly October Canadian weather. So I actually love the material, but that collection from Rapha goes heavily into vintage. It's not vintage inspired, it is straight up vintage. You're going to look like you're riding Leroica, or you would need an old vintage bike to ride with this kit. So, guys, what did you think about the Rapha Swiss collection?
The vintage thing is something I think about a lot, and how I I do like it. Like, I like the idea and I want to do it. But then every time I see it executed, like whether it be buying an actual like vintage one or this kind of, recreation, it just never actually hits for me. Like, there's this like idea in my head of like how cool that part of cycling is. And then you see the pictures of Fausto Coppi, and there's so many great photos of these guys dressed like this, and I just think, wow, what a great look. And then every time I see it sort of in a modern composition, I just can't get behind it. So like, I don't hate this, like, and I don't hate the general idea, but like, I just don't think I could ever do it. And also, I mean, I guess like Switzerland, I have no connection with. I think maybe if you like really love Switzerland, it was a place you're from or a place you visited a lot, or just were kind of a fan of. Like if this was French, like I love France, or Italy, I might be kind of a bit more behind it. But yeah, like, I like the concept, I like the idea, but I actually, every time I see it sort of done, it doesn't fit for me. But I also love that every release now has a musette, because I love musettes, and I want to see them more as just I want them to replace the classic hipster tote.
Musettes are back.
Yeah, and I love it.
They
And the last 3 years, if you walk through any hipster neighborhood, and probably anywhere in the world, there was a guy in New Balance 990s with their coffee shop tote on. And so I'd like to see that replaced, even by non-cyclists, with musettes. I want to see people grabbing their groceries a musette stuff full of their kale.
If you see musettes in your neighborhood, you know the rent's about to triple.
Yeah.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Tony, specifically about the jersey. Actually, they've got a wind jacket in there that doesn't really have the retro styling. It's just like
It's just a Swiss flag.
yeah, it's a black wind jacket with like the Swiss flag on the front. Yeah, sure, why not? But I agree with Tony on the jersey. It's like, I want to like it, but like I can't really. But also practically, I feel like it probably feels like you're riding in a sweater. Like, even if it's made of merino. I mean, maybe it's not that thick. It's kind of hard to tell from the photos.
I don't know, Warren. Like, their merino breathes quite well. Merino
I
is a
know.
very high quality fabric, so I actually think it probably rides okay.
I own plenty of merino, Alex. I know, but part of the reason I think that is the front of the jersey has 2 pockets as well, and you can see with the buttons, and
Yeah, that's
they've got
weird.
well, also what I noticed about that in some of the photos is it looks like the buttons on the front are like exact like nipple spots. So it just kind of looks like you've got nipples while you're riding on the bike, which might chafe on your bib straps. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe they should have gone for white buttons on the
Yeah.
front.
Or how about like, just don't do the buttons in the front? Like, what are you gonna
Yeah.
put there?
If you've got to add extra pockets to your kit, would you rather them in the front of your jersey or cargo bibs?
Oh, I'd go cargo bibs. I think
Yeah.
I agree with Warren. I think it's the buttons in the front are a bit of a design flaw. So to answer your question, Tony, I just don't see how front pockets would look flattering on someone's body. Like, if you put something in there, be it gels or bars, it's going to bulk it up, and it's not going to look very flattering. So I think either back pockets or cargo bibs, which actually is a bit of an evolution for me, because I was rather anti cargo bibs in the past, and now you've just heard me make an argument in favor of cargo bibs. Just back on this collection, there is no bigger fan of Switzerland as a country than me. I love Switzerland. It's beautiful. It's multilingual. It's close to nature. It's rich. It's clean. It's just a fantastic country, and especially for cycling. I know for a fact that we have a listener in the German speaking part of Switzerland, and he sends us photos sometimes, and it's It's just absolutely gorgeous. I've never been. I've only been to the French speaking part of Switzerland, but I love Switzerland. But why would I wear a Swiss jersey? I'm not Swiss. It's just weird. So I don't really see them selling this outside of Switzerland all that much. So it looks good, but I would look at it in a museum. I wouldn't wear it.
All right. So for our next segment, we have a very special guest, which we know when Alex introduces these, he says that every time. And I mean, we usually don't accept people who aren't special in some way, but I like to think that this is even more special because we've brought someone on who's sort of taking us out of our lane. We come with a heavy hand towards the Europhile, Euro style, and we're bringing in a Portland guy, a West Coast guy, to sort of give us a different take on cycling fashion. He is a cyclist, a filmmaker, a YouTuber, an artist. I think he's even maybe a car mechanic. I've seen some of the videos. He's kind of a jack of all trades, and I'm sure a master of all of them as well. Welcome to the podcast, Dustin Klein.
You forgot clothing designer.
Clothing designer. Oh my God.
I mean, that's the tie-in.
Kind of relevant for this podcast. Yeah.
I'm just saying.
I mean, I feel like it's just so much stuff, and I'm so immersed in I can get so immersed in your world that I forgot about that. And also, I don't know, are we allowed to talk about Cadence because you're not with them anymore? I know you do other stuff beyond Cadence, but that's I think where I knew your first iteration, at least of clothing design, is you're not with them anymore.
Yeah, that's where I started it. Yeah. That was the beginning of the clothing designs. Hey, how long do you get to keep a title when you stop doing something?
5 years? I don't know.
5 years.
I don't know. I think you can go on forever. Like,
what's the statute of limitations on a professional activity?
No, I think you can just go on forever, and then as as you sort of dive, you do design clothing. Well, I used to. You kind of start to put a few caveats on it. All right, so I think we're gonna have a lot of fun on this one, but we also have our kind of standard format of the way we do stuff. And the first question usually to our guests is, what got you into cycling? Give us a little background. I know you well from almost 20 years ago in the Match SF video, doing cool Fixie stuff, which is maybe not in vogue anymore, but at the time was hella vibes. But give us the whole rundown, your background, everything that led you up to this point.
In America, like a lot of places, everyone grows up cycling, but it became serious for me when I was interning at a skate, surf, snow music magazine in Sacramento called Heckler. And I was sitting in the office of the editor, and I was interning, so it was free. And I was like there for a couple of weeks, was like, hey, I think I need to get a job. The guy was like, oh yeah, like what would you like to do? And I was like, I'd work at a record store, a skate shop, or bike messenger. That'd be cool. The guy's like, oh yeah, cool. Well, I'll let you know if I hear of anything. And then like later in the day, somebody comes into the office and the editor asks the guy, he goes, hey, you know anyone that needs a bike messenger? And he goes, yeah, we do. He's like, this guy wants a job. And he's like, okay, you're hired. So from that serendipitous moment, my life completely shifted, because up to that point, I wanted to be involved with skateboarding. I grew up with skating. I knew it wasn't good enough to become an athlete in it, so I wanted to become a skate photographer. Hence the magazine internship. And the bike messenger job just like totally altered everything. And through that, I realized there was this whole culture around it, discovered fixed gear bikes because of it. And then one time when I was riding around in Sacramento, I was like, hey, there's clothing for skateboarding. How come there's any clothing for bike messengers? Because skate clothing is just marketing. There's no real function to it, but cycling could have function to it. It's just whatever. And then I ended up moving to San Francisco. And then in San Francisco, I realized that people made things for a living, that you could be an artist for a living. That's where it really clicked for me. And I was like, okay, that's what I need to do. That's the path that I need to go down. And I was trying all these different things to make that happen. And one of those things was a clothing company, and I called it Cadence, and it was lifestyle cycling apparel. It precedes Rapha, but I'm a very DIY and resourceful person. So, no investors. I didn't even know what the fucking investor was. Just DIY, work with what you got, figure it out. And bit by bit by bit, I ended up turning it into a living of mine. And I did that full time until 2016, where I transitioned into making videos. And that's what I do right now. And all of it has been cycling based. And that's it. And then in a couple of years, I'll die. And that's the whole story.
Is Sacramento where you're from originally, where you grew up? Or
Good question. I grew up in a town called Fargo, North Dakota. It's very small. It's in the north in the middle.
I actually wanted to go back to when you're talking about Cadence, because you mentioned that it was before Rapha, and that was something I wanted to ask you about. Because when we were doing the research, because we're serious journalists now, we need to make sure we don't speak out of turn like we have in the past. But yeah, I saw on your site that you found it in 2003, and I was like, oh wow, that's before Rapha. So I was just curious, what kind of things were you making like in the beginning, and what did that transition into?
Well, because I was so DIY, my resources were extremely limited. And I'm a very resourceful person, so I would just use whatever I had. I just knew that what it could be, but I just had to work with where I was. So it was like, okay, I'm just gonna start with t-shirts because like what else is there gonna be? So teach myself how to screen print, like get a computer to make graphics for it, like super slow process. And I'm also like very into subcultures and just alter countercultures in general. So messenger culture is it's this whole world, just like skating. And there's this whole like inspiring thing with it. As I started going, the MASH thing started kicking up, the track bike wave started booming. And at the time, it was still just like printed. I was a one-man band for 7 years. Teach yourself how to screen print bit by bit by bit. And then I taught myself how to sew. And I ended up moving to Seattle and working out of a studio for a company called Reload Bags, which my wife owned. And I met her, and now she's my wife. Moving to Seattle was my jump to doing it full time. And I was like, okay, like I can just like make whatever I want now. So I would kind of make collections. So every season I would make a collection, I would give it a concept, and I would just kind of make whatever I could make at the time. And I would just produce as much of it as I could. I did a lot of modifying or altering of things. So I would buy like blank sweatshirts and like add back pockets or a neck gaiter and print them and just like all these little things to make them like slightly more functional. Denim was something I wanted to do from the very beginning, but how the fuck do you do that? And then at some point I ended up doing a shoe collaboration with a skate shoe company called DVS. And through that, I ended up getting a business partner. And that's where like the resources of manufacturing and stuff came in. And then I had to shift my role into a more of a designer. So like clothing design is done a lot of it's all on the computer. You have to make these things called tech packs. It fucking sucks. It's a romantic job. It's making clothing so amazing. But this button has to be right here. It's got to have this thread, this type of width, blah, 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 blah. Like gross. But you want to make this thing, you do what you got to do. So from that, started to do denim. We beat all the brands. Rapha didn't have denim yet. The Levi's commuter denim, they nipped the double pockets that I did, like tooting the horn, but I don't give a fuck because
forefront.
I earned that shit. And then you see all these other brands kind of like mimicking or duplicating. Ultimately, I'm an artist and a maker. So this was just a way to make things. I wasn't really focused on like moving units and stuff like that. Like it just never did it for me. So whatever, tangent and rant.
I mean, I think Alex is always sick of this story, but it's become kind of as old as time for a lot of millennial cyclists, and it sounds like we have a similar background, sort of skater kids. I mean, I was never ever even close to being not even a shop sponsored kid, but loved it, but got to kind of a point where the physical nature of it maybe just wasn't there for me. And I fell in love with the Fixie scene because it offered a lot of those similarities. That's something I felt I could do kind of in my early 20s, and that same kind of stuff. Like I said, the Match SF videos and the Macraframa. And then for me, that's what directly led to my road cycling, because I was in my cutoff jean shorts with my Van Eras, riding, a drop bar Fixie with toe cages. And once I started to get to a little, a few steeper hills and a few more kilometers in the legs, I realized I think the road bike was the next step. So I'm wondering, when was that sort of light bulb switch of like, Fixies are cool, they're a lot of fun, but I'm missing out on a huge part of the cycling world by not riding a road bike or a geared bike, by not putting on kit. What was the kind of transition that you sort of moved from a Fixie kid to I don't want to ever disparage any Fixie people saying they're not true cyclists, because I love it and I still love it. But let's just say that to a kind of more traditional cyclist.
The reason I called the brand Cadence is because it's a universal cycling term. So it was always lifestyle cycling apparel. It was never Fixie apparel. Like I have much more foresight than that. Like No, never. So it's just about riding bikes, and cycling, like everything else, has like waves and trends and themes and changes. Even within the sub themes, there's little, tire pressures. Like there's always these things that ebb and flow. Maybe it's more saying like it just kind of following life, and like track bikes were fun. And I always had a road bike too, even as a messenger. Life is not black and white. I do not live in extremes ever. Just like the road bike evolution just kind of like made sense. I ended up moving to Berkeley, California, and meeting like a group of people that were more into road cycling. And I would go out with them. And actually, a lot of it too is my business partner at the time, who was like, more like moving units focused. He was like, oh, we could do printed or like kits are just like an easy sell. So that's why fucking everybody and their mother has like a kit company, because it's just like it's like the margin's pretty decent. The price point is high. They're easy to produce. You don't need to do anything. You just need to decorate it. You're not designing anything. Cadence was just kind of like a little bit ahead on a lot of that, which, was great for a little bit. And then it became super saturated, and it wasn't as profitable after a while. I don't think that answered your question, but next question.
Close enough answer.
I was going to say to our listeners that if they haven't watched any of Dustin's YouTube videos, I'd encourage you to go check them out, because I think your videos kind of show exactly what you're saying. Is like you'll have a 10-mile, that's right, he's American, so I'll go to miles for this. Normally we talk in kilometers. 10-mile mountain bike ride, in one video, and then another you're doing like, 50-mile gravel ride through, I don't know, the forests of Oregon. I don't know Oregon very well. And then sometimes you're riding through the city on a commuter, like interviewing local people in the scene, that kind of thing. So I'd just say that not only the videos cover that, they're also pretty entertaining and short, which I appreciate, because so many YouTubers make friggin' like 40-minute videos now.
40-minute?
Yeah.
Holy
Maybe
cow.
not 40, like 20 to 40, I want to say.
Warren, don't get too short. This is an hour and a half podcast. Like
That's
people should,
But bi-weekly
get better attention. So
podcast.
bi-weekly, true. But
guys, can we cut this down to a 5-minute segment? Just the golden nuggets, just the nuggets.
just the quickest sort of like bang, bang, bang. Perfect for social
Fixies,
media.
fashion, mountain bike. That's it. We're done.
Boom. Mic drop. Over.
I was leading to a question, which was actually just like, what got you first started making videos? Not even necessarily like on YouTube, but like, when did you start making videos?
That's kind of an interesting question, because as I've discovered through my life's journey that I'm a maker, like I just need to make things. And as I've gone through these different facets of focusing on things, I've noticed like, oh, I did a lot of them when I was really young. Like when I was like 9-10 years old, I was really into like professional wrestling, and I would modify clothing to be like outfits for that. And that's exactly what Cadence was, and it's still what I do to this day. That is like the clothing designer within me is just like alter a thing. The videos, like I would do them here and there kind of throughout the Cadence journey. I think the first like video I made was of my buddy Keo when I lived in Seattle, and it was like filmed with like a 4 megapixel like piece of shit like point and shoot camera, but like put it together to music, made it in iMovies, and it was fun to make. I mean, editing in the beginning takes like a ton of time, because it's just like a kind of a labor intensive process. But I was doing all this other stuff, so I didn't like really focus on the videos. And then when I ended up moving to Seattle Portland 2016 2015, a buddy of mine showed me some vlogs on YouTube, and I was like, what is that? That sounds fucking stupid. And he showed me a few, and I was like, oh, like I have all these like skills, like I could do this. So a couple like values that I have is creative freedom to work for myself, by myself. And like these video things kind of had all those in it. And I was like, oh, you just pick a subject, you find a story, a theme, or a culture to talk about. And then, I was starting to do all these rides. You do go these rides, they're like 6, 8, 12 hours of your life, just like bloop. I was like, why? How can I make something with that? They're awesome. You feel great afterwards, but kind of feels like a waste of time. Like what if you could do something with that? And then that's kind of how it just evolved.
For me, it's not working. I hate. I mean, you seem to have found you seem to have found the kind of love what you do and you don't work a day in your life. it doesn't matter how much I love something. The minute it becomes a job, I couldn't do it. I don't think. Like, I think that it's just, there's something about me. Like, I think I just I hate having people tell me what to do, even if that person is me. And so it's like the minute, like as much as I love riding my bike, it's like the minute I did no longer have the option to be like, no, I'm not going to ride today. Like, as long as I always have the out option, I like what I'm doing. The minute it's like I have no option,
Like for me, it's just being in it, just doing it,
Yeah.
and just enjoying it. I don't know.
Like the purest answer, because it's also
yeah.
like very, very true too. This experience.
You know, Dustin has a great video on YouTube about a road called Japanese Hollow, which I think is it around Portland, Dustin?
Yeah, it's east of here, like an hour.
It just seems so beautiful, like the scenery, like just being in it. Like that's what I
Yes.
get out of it.
I suppose in Toronto there's no beautiful scenery, so there's no in it.
Well, that's
but
the difference between you guys and maybe Dustin and I.
you guys are on the country roads, the fire roads, the the luxury gravel. We've got to deal with basically suburban highways.
So Dustin, can we talk? So you said you moved to Portland in 2016. What got you to move to Portland? And tell us a little bit about the cycling scene over in Portland.
It was actually April 15 of 2015. And the reason we moved to Portland was my wife and I just wanted a place where we could afford a home. And like kind of like the big picture for us was, because I always like to work for myself and by myself, the ultimate dream for me is like having an outbuilding in the place that I live in. So which is actually realization. It ended up happening. So getting a home somewhere to have a studio, to like have this little like holistic experience. And the place needed to have cycling culture. And it kind of had to be on the West Coast. And there's not a lot of affordable places on the West Coast. But Portland's kind of always been this like little nugget kind of hiding there. So, part of the reason it's a little more affordable too is because the weather's kind of shit for like 9 months out of the year.
Well, I was going to ask if that impacts the cycling culture kind of negatively, or because a couple of episodes ago we interviewed an Australian brand, Attacker, and they said one of the reasons why Australia became such a prominent country in the world of cycling is because it's always sunny and dry, and you can just ride every day. And Portland's kind of on the other end of that, right?
Cycling culture here is still super strong. It's just like I don't really, the riding's good, like it's kind of affordable, like also it kind of like begets itself, like as there's a few things it kind of like attracts, like for whatever reason it's a cycling city and I'm super grateful for it, and it's just like a great little place. And whatever, the weather sucks but is what it is. I grew up in Fargo, North Dakota. It's way fucking better than that.
So we all know that Portland's slogan is "Keep Portland Weird." I hope
Is
we
it?
all know. Is it not? Maybe we don't all know it, but I've heard that "Keep Portland Weird,"
It's just like a bumper
a
sticker.
bumper sticker thing, and then
We all know that this thing I saw once is officially a thing.
that's how most of the stuff in my life works. But
I'm gathering.
You don't know how true that is,
yeah,
Dustin.
God, that's why I'm laughing so hard. So some people have said "Keep Portland Weird." And we know that you have a very eclectic style, and you don't like to be put into a lane in cycling. From your videos to the clothing you've made, to the art, to the type of bikes you ride, you really cross a spectrum. Now, here on Cycling Fashion Week, we advocate for a lot of silly but justifiably important rules. No white shoes with black socks, stem must be slammed, tan sidewalls, etc. I have a feeling maybe that doesn't fit with some of your ethos, but are there any rules, cycling rules, whether you've come up with them yourself or you've seen them elsewhere, that you absolutely follow?
Why do you guys, what are the rules for?
That's a great
That's a great question. Does anybody know?
So you got to know them. You got to know them to break them, right? You got to have that moral code that has
I
been
don't
written in the sacred texts, and then later in life you can kind of lapse from it.
that's a non-answer. Are you a politician?
We just got stumped on our own rules. I mean, we've always positioned them as just like what we find like creates nice looking road bikes specifically.
I think it's an aesthetic thing. I think the rules give everyone the opportunity for sort of an even playing field if you're not maybe gifted with a great eye for art, design, and style. And if you kind of
I like
follow the
that.
basics, you'll always sort of pull it off, right? It's like the first rule of fashion is black, because no matter what you wear, if it's all in black, you'll probably look pretty good. And so I think it's kind of a way, that's what Alex is sort of saying, at a certain point you can learn them and you can get so good you can break them.
Yeah, there's a certain safety in a set of rules that once you develop a base of general culture and knowledge, then you can experiment.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Let's call them guidelines. Rules sounds
Okay,
very,
that's fine.
like,
Yeah.
disgusting to me, actually, because rules imply that you're gonna get it wrong and that you're wrong if you don't do it right, and that's, like, fucked up. Like, if someone wants to get into cycling and they're like, "Oh, that's not the right rules. Your color doesn't match the right color." Gross. Like, that's where's the support in that?
I think guidelines is fair.
I think guidelines is
Advice.
a better advice because we also have said like the sort of the height of cycling style is when someone can take sort of whatever from, from different collections of companies, different sort of just kind of everything and put together, especially if we're talking about kind of an outfit, a cycling outfit, like a great outfit, even though, the brands don't match, the colors are kind of weird. So we don't want to seem like we don't want people to do that because we do. And we think that that's actually the like height of cycling style is when someone just can sort of see through, see through kind of all the clutter and put together this beautiful piece and sort of, make their bike exactly how they want to look nice. But I guess you're right. I think the guidelines to start it off for those, some of the uninitiated or the bit tepid is a good rule because it gives you sort of an idea of where to sort of start from. And then you can climb the mountain peak and then hopefully one day put together a cycling outfit that no one has ever seen, but also blows everybody on the group away.
Love this. So you just changed your perspective on it essentially from like wrong to like join us. And that's massive. To me, that's huge. That's being like, this sounds weird from being exclusive to inclusive.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely big on inclusivity
And exclusivity.
and yeah, the right
I do agree. I
exclusivity.
do understand and I do agree with that.
One question, Dustin, just about you've alluded to it, Tony has, is I seen in some of your videos that you do alter existing cycling clothing and just do whatever you want to it. Is that the maker compulsion, or is it you just want to see if something works to test out functionality, or what's behind that?
It's totally both. You guys have all seen this. You guys have a keen eye for this. Like stuff that's too function driven, function and then nothing else matters is just like offensive for the eyes.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like it's just like, bro, like consider it just a little bit more, please, please. A lot of times will be, like, oh, this pocket is like too deep or shallow or not there or whatever. I'll just add it if I can. Like sometimes stuff is too gnarly to do. I'll just put it on, and that's where I like won't totally care what it'll look like because I just want to see how it'll function. And oftentimes it will look okay. I also think like a DIY or a modified look just as a whole tends to look more interesting because it's modified, it's touched, it's different. Not always the case, often. And then also, I'll get a thing, and if I don't like the way it looks, I'll just modify it. I'll alter it. I'll give it some aesthetic element to just make it look different. Hopefully, it looks better. Just make it kind of my own. And also, too, I'm like hyper aware of brand labeling. So I'll delabel, modify, alter like all the time. If I'm wearing a logo, it's very considered. Just because you bought it doesn't mean you have to rep it.
Yeah.
So that's actually really interesting, Dustin, what you said about the labeling, because I do find in recent cycling fashion trends, like brands have just gone all in on block colors with massive labels. And someone that we interviewed recently, another brand actually, who makes some collaboration with artists, like slightly more kind of maximalist jerseys with actual artwork on them, were saying, it's kind of boring in a sense where everyone's making block colors with branding on them, and it's literally become whose brand name do you like the best. And I am hoping that we kind of slowly move away from that, but it's interesting that your approach is just to block out the branding.
All the time. I can see it from all these different perspectives, from the brand side to the consumer side to just like noticing it on somebody. Like it's kind of a way to give yourself power. These brands don't own us. Like I love the fact that I'm wearing a Deus shirt right now too. Like it's like a way to kind of take your style, own your style.
Yeah, I see the things you do, but I'll take a piece of cycling kit and I'll look at it and be like, I spent couple $100 on this. I don't want to touch it. I don't, because in my mind, I don't want to ruin it by touching it, whereas you'll just literally sew new stuff onto it. So I appreciate that. Like there's a boldness there for sure.
One, I've done it for a long time. Two, I don't often have to pay for everything I get. And three, it makes me want to wear it. Like if I couldn't do that, like maybe I wouldn't wear it. Yeah, the funny thing too with like brands like want that exposure. They want like that's what marketing is. Like people they pay for people to see their thing. Okay, I pay to have this product, but I'm not paying to promote your product, which my situation is like slightly exaggerated compared to like anyone else because I do put myself forward, so it's even more on my mind. But even if that wasn't the case, like going to the grocery store, doing the thing, like we're not defined by these like labels and brands. And I fucking love like messing with logos and like, like, ooh, this logo represents like quality and this one represents like not quality. And like, what if they're flipped? Or what if it's like a fucking like Makita logo on my cycling kit and it's like kind of confusing? Or the van has a NASA logo and it's like, I love that like culture jamming. Like I chalk it all up to play. It's just like playing with your environment. It's playing with the people that you're around. It's playing with some other interesting adjective.
Somewhat related, I wanted to ask you about some of the bike frames you've painted over the years, because you've done a whole bunch of, I don't know if they're collaborations, you did them your own bikes or a bit of both, because they're pretty unique. You can see them on your website, dustinklein.com. I was just curious, like how some of those came about, and if you have a set approach for them, or you just do whatever based on the bike you're painting.
It's so similar to the apparel. Like I can't help but modify the things in my life. I'm just like compelled to do it. And I know specifically for the bikes, a lot of that kind of inspiration or initial like awareness of being able to do that is from messenger culture, specifically San Francisco. Like because the bike is the livelihood of these messengers, they'll like embellish them in all these like fucking cool ways. And cities, metropolises are they're highly competitive. So style tends to raise up. It's just so visually stimulating and good. I'm good at like going on a roll and just like not really.
I just want to step back a bit. You're talking about the brand stuff. I think that what's interesting, and I guess it's a question like, how is this possible in a sport that is generally so expensive? And I don't know what it's like in the Portland scene, but even the used bike scene in Toronto is, we've posted about it, is like so insane that you can't even say, oh, well, I'll get a good deal. But how do you make it so something that's an inherently expensive sport to do and status aren't so connected? Because that's kind of what the issue you're talking about with the branding. And I completely agree with you. And I remember as a kid, I used to wear a Nike T-shirt. My dad would say, they're not paying for that on your chest, and and I definitely was more into brands, and I've lost that. But at the same time, when the sort of minimum entry to a sport like say road cycling or even gravel cycling is in the thousands of dollars, it's hard for people not to want it to be a peacocking, a status. I've got the newest thing. I've got the thing that do you have any idea how expensive that is? I mean, I do that. I ride by someone. You're talking to a friend and you go, oh man, even if I don't like the bike, you go, that's a $14,000 bike, right? You're pointing it out because you can see all the specs on it. You know which S-Works it is. Like it's such a hard thing to sort of balance between, because it's an expensive sport. You're going to spend a lot of money, and people are going to always be kind of looking to keep up with the Joneses.
That wasn't a question. That was like you just did a monologue.
Yeah,
that was your rant. It was a good one though, because it felt very finished.
I guess I meant to mention, like, how do you think we deal with that as an important member of the world cycling community, Dustin Klein? How do we deal with a sport that we want to be inclusive, but it can be exclusionary just based on its cost?
One of the things that's really interesting about Portland cycling culture doesn't encompass all of those things. It's fascinating because San Francisco, 100%. Seattle, 100%. These bigger cities, like I said earlier, cities have this like kind of competitive nature to them, which status and style and what you have and who you know become more and more like prevalent, regardless of if they're important or not. And Portland is like this hilarious place where like style, no. Not a thing. Like, not that they don't care. It's just like not really thought about. So you're like, yeah, okay. You take the good with the bad. But the statusy stuff is not really around, and it's such a relief because that shit can get so exhausting because it's so fucking pointless. Like, who gives a shit? Like, that person just has more resources than that person, or that person's just willing to go into more debt than that person, or that person has a hookup, or you know what? We all have our own paths and our own journeys and our own access to things.
But that's probably not a Portland specific thing. I would venture to say it's probably more correlated with the size of the city. Like a New
Yes, it's
York or
100%
a
that.
San Francisco, you're gonna get that necessarily, but like a Portland, or I guess I don't know, like are places like Portland and Austin, Texas, like still like that since everyone moved there during the pandemic? I'm not sure, but
Well, it's interesting you say that because one of the questions we were going to ask you is we've sort of noticed, and we like to joke about how like Big Mountain Bike is actually behind gravel cycling because they keep offering these new gravel products that are really just mountain bike stuff.
Wait, what's Big Mountain Bike?
It's a conspiracy where Big Mountain Bike actually controls gravel cycling.
Troy Lee?
I don't know.
It's just like big, like the conglomerate, right? Big
Big
tobacco,
pharma.
big cigarette, or
But all those bike companies make all the road bikes you guys like too.
We've just seen all these products being sold as gravel products that we think are really just mountain bike products. Now you have a website like Cycling Tips, great website, but they're like saying, oh, the best upgrade you can get for your gravel bike is foam tire inserts. It's like, what? Just ride a mountain bike then. I'm going on a bit of a tangent. This whole episode is just going to be tangents with Dustin Klein. That's the episode title. But I was just curious if you've noticed like this encroachment of mountain bike style into like gravel cycling, or maybe that's not even a part of the scene in Portland. It's a pretty road centric scene in Toronto specifically. There are mountain biking, there's gravel biking, but it's very heavily road. But we're starting to notice a little more like mountain bike style filtering into some gravel stuff. And I'm just curious if you've seen anything like that, or if you have any idea what I'm talking about.
Like Mountain Dew? Extreme Energy? One thing that I've noticed from just mountain bike as a whole is as the category within cycling, it's kind of like the most forward as far as like technological innovation. First one to do tubeless tires. Oh my God, tubeless is in road bikes. Is that Big Mountain Bike?
Mm-hmm.
First one to do one by. Like, it's just kind of like, for whatever reason, the most innovative, that is definitely a word, form of cycling. So there's going to be trickle down. That's just how it works. I mean, gravel is the thing in between road and mountain bike. So of course, but it passes through. Like,
Warren would say that tubeless tires is Big Mountain Bike for sure.
I know tubeless tires on road is a perfect example of the big mountain bike conspiracy we talk about, where because I've tried tubeless on road bikes, it was like the worst experience of my life. The road ride I mentioned that Tony and I did the other day, a guy was running tubeless, fucking sprayed all over my face. We've always just said it's like it's really just mountain bike companies trying to get you to, by buying all these things you don't actually need to enjoy, like gravel cycling.
the reason it's big mountain bike is because you're right. They make the same bikes, but it's like a pushing, like you start at road.
what if you started mountain bikes? It depends on where you live and what you're into. And also, nobody's that organized to be like conspiracy theory. I guarantee no one's that organized. People have a hard enough time replying to emails, yet alone like, we're going to dominate the market by oversaturating unwanted hoo-haws and thingamawhatsits.
I don't know how seriously we believe the big gravel conspiracy. It's just a pretty good recurring bit because, in a way, it's kind of playing up the excessive consumerism that cycling happens a lot, because it's like, oh, you got a
North
road bike,
America.
now you need a gravel bike. You got gravel tires, now you need tubeless tires. Now you need
Well, that's
tubeless
just
inserts.
capitalism.
I guess
Things
so.
are just always innovating. Welcome to capitalism. You don't have to buy any of those. Those are choices that you get to make.
You mean I don't have to buy all the things that are advertising me on Instagram?
How empowering.
We're learning so much today.
It looks so good when you see it. You think, oh man, I'm going to be a better person if I buy this.
Well, I'm not saying it's not hard and that we don't want them, but it's a choice.
You're talking about what you've done, what you're going to do, what you want to do. We've spoken about this podcast where we're going to go, but the real question is it always a time? Because has everything been done?
Rumor has it except foam inserts on road bikes. That has not been done.
It's coming.
It's coming.
It's absolutely coming. I want to ask one more question before, and then I think we'll dive into rapid fire. You said everything's been done. And by the way, just for our listeners, well, I don't know if all your videos are called this. It's only the Tuesday and Thursday ones. Everything's been done. The question I was going to ask, so it's not specific to everything's been done, to just your videos. How do you come up with the videos? Is it just like, you say you like to make things. So is it kind of just follow like whatever tangents on your brain? Do you like find certain things, or yeah, how do the videos come about?
Well, more and more recently, each video has been sponsored, which actually really helps come up with a concept because I'm like slightly accountable.
Yeah.
So that's like a big part of it. A big sponsor I have is the Pros Closet. So then the video is going to be based about some bike. So then it's like, okay, like often they're about a ride of some form anyways. And the ride is also just a great story because there's such a definitive beginning, middle, and end. Or just there's bikes that we all want to ride, right? Like,
Yeah.
I want to see what the crazy mountain bike is like, or the crazy gravel bike, or like, also too, just kind of like if I do too many ride videos, I get kind of burnt out on them. And it's like, okay, like I want to like modify a hoodie and like 4 people will watch it, but I'll feel like moderately creatively fulfilled. And then I'll go back to making ride videos.
Yeah, really, we're just asking. So once we run out of people to interview, we need to come up with episode ideas.
Just go back to your old people. Have me on again. We'll just tangent away. Fuck, it's gonna be amazing.
We'll probably start having some repeat guests pretty soon.
Well, definitely recurring guest Dustin Klein, because
there's lots more tangents to touch on. All right, so we're gonna wrap up the interview by doing rapid fire questions, which we like to do with all our guests, which are, as our listeners know, are just short questions meant to be kind of like yes or no answers. So, San Francisco or Portland?
For what?
To live in.
Oh, living? Well, I mean, San Francisco is the best city in America, but Portland's more affordable. So
I think San Francisco's the answer.
I mean, if I could afford it, if I could afford to buy a house there, that's where I would be.
Fixie or geared bike?
Both.
Gravel riding, mountain biking, or road riding?
Why do you guys got to draw these lines? Why is there? I don't understand.
Stop questioning.
Stop questioning.
Yeah, stop questioning our philosophy. You're making our question our whole existence. Best coffee stop in Portland?
I drink tea.
Best tea stop in Portland?
I make it at home.
Yeah. What about best kombucha in Portland? Because you drink a lot of that in your videos.
You're not going to be surprised by this answer.
You make it at home.
Do you make your own beer too?
No, thanks.
Okay. Laces or boas?
Yes.
This is going to be the answer for all of these. White or black shoes?
Sure.
White or black socks?
Probably.
Steel, titanium, or carbon bike frame?
Of course.
But do you actually have a preference, just out of curiosity? And that's not like an elitist or whatever thing. It's just genuine curiosity if you have a preference.
The only aluminum bike that I own is a track bike, so it's a very extreme experience. But I do have a titanium gravel bike, carbon gravel bike. I've had steel ones. They all just serve a different purpose. Like, I don't see some hierarchical, like, one is better than the other. Like, also, I view bikes as tools. So each bike just serves a different purpose. There's not one gun to rule them all. Each ride has like 4 perfect bikes for it. So
that sounds like capitalism talking.
Yeah, it sounds like the dream for a big mountain bike because they want to sell you mountain bike, gravel, and road.
Yes, please.
All right, last question. This will be a point of contention. It's actually a topic we covered in a recent episode. Bike, quote unquote, bike food, so like gels and stuff, or real food when you're riding.
I tend to do real food, but I'm not opposed to, packages.
Okay.
Packages are like when you're traveling or when your kind of back is against the wall. We tend to just make food.
All right. Well, Dustin Klein, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And for our listeners out there, you can catch Dustin Klein on YouTube. The channel is just Dustin Klein. Makes videos. Everything's been done, but just videos in general. He is on Instagram at Dustin Klein with a little underscore after his name. DustinKlein.com if you want to see more of his art. Any other channels I'm forgetting to plug?
No, that's more than enough. We'll cut a couple of those out. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast and expanding our minds to guideline or what are rules, what are guidelines, what is anything?
Really good question.
Okay, after the great interview with Dustin Klein, we get back to regular programming and segment into the Canal, where we throw what we don't like from the world of cycling, cycling style, and cycling fashion into Montreal's picturesque La Chine Canal. Well, why don't you start, Warren?
The thing I'm going to throw in the Canal is I'm fairly confident it's something that most cyclists out there can relate to. And I'm going to throw into the Canal tires that are too hard to get onto the rim. Lately, if you run a tubeless ready tire, even if you run it with a tube, which is what I do, I use tubeless ready. Those seem to be much harder to get onto rims these days, but I think there's certain brands like Challenge that are kind of notorious for being hard to get on. But then there's also brands out there that are pretty easy to get on. Why can't the bike industry get together and share some secrets for the rubber compound or whatever that makes it easy to get tires on? Like, I also say this as someone who I've broken both of my thumbs in separate bike crashes. My thumb strength is not at 100% anymore. It's harder for me to get tires onto the rim. Just make it easier on us. I don't want to spend an hour and a half getting tires on my rims. You can sell us all this crap and upcharge all the foam tire inserts, but you can't make tires that are easy to get on? Come on.
So I think actually our good friends at Cycling Tips and the Nerd Alert podcast have spoken quite a bit about this, and it has something to do with just standard, the tolerances between, right? And it's just these things have to be so exact, and every company is making a different tolerance. So I think if you're finding some of the archives of the Nerd Alert, if you're interested in this, they kind of talk a little more of the technical side of it. But I'm in agreement with you. Like, it sucks that putting a tire on has basically become the most work you have to do on your bike. Like, I could recable sometimes, and I'm not a good mechanic. I'm not even saying like I'm a good mechanic, faster than I can put some tires on.
You're right. It is standards, and it's not just the tire. I think it's also the rims, and with the evolving rim specifications where you have like wider rim widths and all that. I'm not going to get into the details. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are familiar with all that. But you know what? I don't want to go back and listen to find out why it's hard to get tires on. I want a solution. I want to know why they're not bothering to make it easier. Figure it out, make it easier for consumers, and I'll honestly, if you make a tire that is easy to get on a rim, you can charge me $500 per tire and I'll buy it.
No, I agree. It's extremely annoying, but get yourself some VeloFlex from our friends at leclub.cc. Great tires. You can flex on people with your tires. Are they easy to put on, Warren?
No.
but they're fast. But they're fast.
The tires are amazing.
I've heard they're very fast. I might need to get up there.
They look great. They feel great on the road. They're fast rolling, but they're not easy to get on.
Is there a positive correlation between the tire quality and how hard it is to put on the bike, on the rim?
I feel like every time someone's like, it is like, so like I ride Challenge tires on both my cross bike and my road bike, and people are like, oh yeah, Challenge are great. And both of them were like, one of them, I am embarrassed to say this, but I had to take it to the shop. I just couldn't get it on. Like, when it was so hard that I was just like, I need a pro mechanic with those like mechanic forearm strength or, whatever to put this on. And so, but then they are great tires.
I mean, realistically, probably, but I don't care. Figure it out.
Okay, can I do my Canal?
Of course.
So I've been sitting on this one for a little while. I don't want people to get offended with this because, I don't want to get angry emails or saying I'm an elitist or, I am. I think we all know this by now. So a bit of linguistic elitism on my part here. And one thing that I'm going to throw in the Canal that I find extremely annoying is when English speakers, so native English speakers, so call it people, Anglo-Saxons, people from the Anglosphere, they might be British, they might be Canadian, they might be American, they might be Australian, they might be New Zealanders. So people from the English-speaking world, I have started to notice that those people that are into cycling are way overusing the word chapeau to congratulate someone. So let's say Mathieu van der Poel pulls off a great performance at some race. He just, destroys the competition, has a fantastic race. And then the commentator, most likely from the United Kingdom, will say, well, chapeau, Mathieu van der Poel. And it's just so stupid. Like, it is It's basically like a 19th century British person's idea of how French people speak. You know how English Canadians like think that we French speakers like just walk around saying sacre bleu all the time. Like literally one person said that in the 19th century, and you guys have been depicting us as sacre bleu saying people for the past like 150 years. Nobody says that. And chapeau is kind of the same thing. Like it might be used once a year, maybe like, hey, chapeau, but that's it. And especially when it's coming from someone who has no prior knowledge of the language, but it is their one French word that they want to use to make themselves sound sophisticated, worldly, multilingual when they are anything but. It is truly in the canal. Please stop using that word. If I see people from the Anglo-Saxon countries overuse that word, I will literally go and throw you in the canal physically.
I agree with you. And I would say the real word equivalent is signing off an email with cheers.
Yes, you want to sound British.
Exactly. I hate it. I hate that so much. I hope no current or former colleagues of mine are listening, because a lot of them have done it or do it. I know no one means any harm by it. I hate it so much. We're not at the bar. We're not having a drink. Say thank you. You don't need to say anything. Just put your name. What's wrong with like blah blah blah, Alex, blah blah blah, Warren? You don't have to say cheers. Like, ugh.
We'll circle back on that. Fuck you, Warren. Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way, actually more with ciao, when someone, especially the like, fourth generation Italian who's never stepped foot in Italy is, ciao, ciao, right? And you're just thinking, all right, man, shut up. Like
See,
that's
that one doesn't bother me so much, but the chapeau, it's like it's very sort of antiquated French that no one uses, and yeah.
You're directing this specifically at the angle. So what if they just switch it to hats off? Hats off to Matthew Vanderpool for a
That's
great
fine. That's okay.
performance.
Yeah, that's all right. That's
So they
okay.
can
I
use the
know.
kind of what essentially is the English equivalent, and they could go buck wild on it. They can kill it more than we kill jokes on this podcast, and you'll be okay with
No
it.
problem with that. Let me caveat, if it's an English speaking person who has like an intimate knowledge of the language, might have raced in France, like speaks perfect French,
Our
it
good
could
friend
be,
David Millar.
or yeah, David Miller, yeah, I think even Bradley Wiggins speaks pretty decent French. Michael Woods, shout out Michael Woods, lives in Quebec, does interviews in French, is very functional. I can live with that, but when it's like some rando like from, I don't know, from the Midlands in the UK, and it's the only word they know in French, and they want to show that they're a big cycling connoisseur, I just think it's stupid, and y'all need to stop doing it.
Cheers.
Hats off to you for that one.
Okay, Tony, your turn. What do you got?
First, I want to say I think we should have started a spreadsheet on Canal, because we're getting deep into this podcast now, and I don't remember what I've said, but I'm pretty sure I haven't said this one. Although I feel like the theme of this I've talked about a lot, which is sort of involves new cyclists, not necessarily completely new to the sport, but I'm talking about racing, specifically kind of crit racing and stuff. And so you could be a new cyclist or just new to racing. And I'm not throwing crit racing itself into the canal. I think it's an exciting style of racing. I think it's fun to be competitive when you're an amateur, if that's what you want to do. I think actually crit racing could be, a really way to sort of, the way the Legion guys are doing it, to sort of push cycling in North America. It fits a little bit better. But I'm throwing sort of newer cyclists in who don't take the time to learn the sport of bike racing. Being fit is great, having Zwift fitness, maybe even a group ride, but cycling is incredibly dangerous. There's a lot of, your body parts on the line and very expensive machinery on the line. And I think that everyone who wants to race, good on you, mate. If you want to, can I say that as a half Australian? Go to some sort of learn to race. I know in Toronto here, we have a great club that puts on races, and they offer a learn to race that you can do, and they teach you all the skills and line taking and stuff. I'm sure most local clubs in your town that puts on crit races offer something similar. Don't be too egotistical, think you're a hot shot. If you haven't raced before, go to those things and learn the proper way to do it. You can still have fun, but let's not break too many clavicles.
I agree with you. I've been I've actually been watching some of the local crit races Tony's talking about that's run by a local club called Midweek, because they happen midweek. They do a learn to race clinic. They do like bumping drills. They do it on grass, so you can work your way up to the pavement to get comfortable. I actually did learn to race a couple of years ago, and it's a great service, not just for racing, but even just general cycling. Because crit racing is so exciting, both to watch and to participate in, that people are just so ramped up. They just want to do it. They don't want to hear about like the safety and learning how to take lines right, how to ride like safely in a bunch, because it's racing, no safety. Yeah, there is safety. And, I think maybe people are watching like NorCal cycling videos, which is pretty good YouTube channel hosted by a racer in Northern California, a guy named Jeff Linder, I think. And he basically analyzes amateur race footage that people send to him. He does his own. He's very high level. You can learn a lot watching his videos, I think, but you still have to go to a race and put it into practice. So like you can watch those videos and think, I know how to race now. Probably not. You should probably still actually go practice these drills, which is one of the things he says on NorCal is like, go practice bumping drills on grass, and that's something your local club probably facilitates. So you're right, Tony.
Just want to add that, and then unfortunately, the way crits are, which are usually tight packs, breakaways rarely succeed. You who may not be experienced and haven't learned the race properly may cause the crash and subsequently take out a whole bunch of other people. So it's not really just your body and bike on the line. It may be up, quite a few, could be 10 people that, depending on how the crash happens, that you take out. And that's not fair to them. And so, I mean, crashes do happen. There's no doubt about it. It's not saying there'll never be a crash if you're racing any type of racing, but always mitigate your risk the best you can. And I think learning the skills is a way you should do that before you step on. And these races are fast. Even an amateur crit's going to average 40 something kilometers an hour for half hour.
Even outside of the crit world, like a guy I work with who's a very, very strong cyclist, very serious about his training and his riding, got taken out by some newbie who just caused a massive pileup at the start of the ride at Paris to Ancaster, which is a pretty chill gravel. Is it a race? Like
people race it.
Yeah.
It's as much a race as it is like a community event. Proper professional racers come to it.
Well, he got taken out. I think it was is it a neutral rollout? I think he got taken out.
It's a mass start.
Yeah, mass start. So he got.
It's not neutral though.
No,
it's like start and go.
Okay, well, so he got taken out in the first 5 kilometers by some guy who had no idea what he was doing. Probably had never ridden in a bunch before, and just caused a massive pile up. His bike, his Cervelo Aspero, which probably the only Cervelo that we like on this podcast, was in some pretty bad shape. So yeah, you got to learn the skills. Okay, we're at the end of the episode. That's it. Another episode of Cycling Fashion Week. Thank you very much to special guest Dustin Klein. This was a lot of fun. Kind of got us a little bit outside of our comfort zone, but this was very enjoyable. We had a good laugh. It was fun. Thank you, Dustin Klein. Follow him on Instagram at Dustin Klein. Is it Dustin Klein _ Warren? I think that's the Dustin Klein _ Check out his videos, his YouTube channel, simply called Dustin Klein. He's got a lot of good material there. And yeah, thank you, Dustin. Thank you, Warren. Thank you, Tony, as usual. And thank you to our partners over at leclub.cc. Go to leclub.cc. You can get your kit there. You can get your accessories. You can get your coffee. They've got incredible stuff. They've got great brands, MAP, Albion, Sweet Protection, Quack shoes, anything you want. It's there at leclub.cc. They do fast shipping on a global basis. It will arrive in great shape. It will arrive fast. They will send you a little message even. And for our listeners, we deliver value for you. You get a 15% off code by using the code FashionWeek15 on your purchases at leclub.cc. Get 15% off. That's a pretty great deal. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you in a few weeks with another episode of Cycling Fashion Week.